Hello, my name's Hazel Allan, and I am the author of this children's book, Bree McCready and the Half Heart Locket. It's published by Strident Publishing, and it's been on the shelves since August 2009, so it's still fairly new at this stage. So I would like to introduce you to the main characters in the story. There are three children. There's Bree, who's right in the middle here. She's the main heroine of the story. And there's Honey, Zaz, and there's Sandy Greenfield. And they're all 12 years old, and they're about to embark on the adventure of their lives. They find a half-heart locket, a bit like this one I'm wearing, comes in two halves, and it fits into the slot on the front of a magic book, which gives them 7 wishes, which are not really like wishes, they're more like instructions, and it takes them on an adventure full of danger and self-discovery. Now, I want to read from chapter 10 of the book, which is called Saved by Whisker. And basically, it's wish 2, and it's shrunk them down to the size of tiny ants. And they're trying to escape from the main villain of the story, who's called Fallow Federal, and he's a real baddie. And he's the coup for the book. So the book has helped them to escape by shrinking them down, and they've been hiding inside Bree's doll's house. So I'm going to read from, we're going to pick up from this part where they're leaving the doll's house. Honey led them back out into the hall, where they had to step over a fallen coat stand to get out of the front door. On the threshold they looked out at the impossible distance between them and the bedroom door. The huge moon over Rockwell had washed Bree's room in blue and provided enough light to see the chaos left behind. The floor was scattered with clothes and objects which to the friends looked like a hostile alien city of dark and formidable shapes. Fallow Federal was nowhere to be seen, and yet the air still rippled from the reek of his breath and the echo of his presence, suggesting he might return at any moment. They agreed that the safest route was around the edges of the room. That way they would have fewer obstacles to negotiate. So with their backs pressed to the skirting boards, they sidled along until they reached the stretch below the broken window. What would ordinarily have been tiny slivers were now hazardous, jagged mountains, and it required extra care to navigate their way round them. They continued through the Valley of Clothes like explorers in a dark and dangerous world. As they moved further away from the shaft of moonlight, they found themselves surrounded by darkness again, and soon they had to feel around in front of them with every guarded step they took. Sandwiched between her friends, Bree kept glancing up at the shattered window. She wasn't sure how much longer they would stay this small, but she was convinced that they had to get out of this flat as soon as possible. Sandy had been tripping and falling since they'd left the doll's house, so when he suddenly started spluttering and waving his arms around, Bree didn't think anything was untoward. She and Honey stopped and rolled their eyes. They were on the verge of laughing when they realised that something was terribly wrong. "Ah, get off!" he shouted, clawing at his face and batting the air around his head as if brushing away a swarm of persistent flies. "What's the matter?" yelled Bree, panicked. "Oh, something's sticking to me." Bree recognised Sandy's outline against the small sliver of light coming in through the crack in the door. His feet appeared to be rooted to the spot, and he was spitting and gagging and clawing wildly at his face. "Stop moving," pleaded Bree. He looked mystified as he tried in vain to move his limbs, until it dawned on him that he was totally wound up in some kind of silvery, sticky thread. His silhouette resembled a pathetic puppet that had been hung up and forgotten. "Oh no," breathed Honey, her tone so foreboding that it struck instant alarm in Bree. Grabbing Bree by the shoulder, she pulled her away from the tangled mess. Honey motioned for her to stay where she was and turned to Sandy, who hung half obscured by the shadows. "You must stay completely still," she said, as calmly as she could. "Moving around will only make things worse, and it'll know you're here." Sandy suddenly felt very ill. "What do you mean, it?" Keeping her distance, Honey looked around as though expecting something terrible to emerge from the shadows. With narrowed eyes, she inspected the glistening thread that had wrapped around Sandy. She scratched her chin thoughtfully. "I think," she said, "you're stuck in the spider's web." "Oh, well, that's a relief," said Bree, starting towards Sandy. Surely a web was the least of her problems. A low, rumbling vibration stopped her in her tracks. It grew with alarming intensity until the floor shook violently. "What is that?" yelped Sandy, his voice distorted with terror. A large dark outline had emerged, casting a shadow that looked like a giant hand with waving fingers. It edged closer to Sandy, its vibrations causing the web to wobble and shimmer in the half light. The two girls stood shaking with fear. They knew if they got too close, they too would become ensnared in its gloomy threads. Nevertheless, it felt too awful to stand back and do nothing but wait for the inevitable to happen. The trembling beneath their feet intensified, then from high above them came a stomach-lurching thump. Bree looked up, and to her horror she saw something that resembled a length of hairy rope waving around, testing the space in front of it. After a few seconds another length of stubbly rope appeared, and then another. She knew with horrifying certainty that she was staring at the long prickly legs of a gigantic spider. The creature was feeling its way forward, searching for its unfortunate prey. Bree looked back at Sandy hanging pathetically from his sticky snare. Her heart sank when she saw his face. She pulled herself free from Honey's grip and ran towards the web. Honey shouted after her, but all she could do was watch as the giant spider lowered itself ever slower, ever closer. Bree stopped short of contact with the web. "Sandy," she whispered, her voice strangled with despair. Was she already too late? Sandy jerked at the sound of Bree's voice, just as the shadow of a giant moving limb was cast across his pale forehead. Without thinking, Bree thrust her arm through a gap in the sticky web and pulled his wrist. As she did, she realized that the left side of her body wouldn't move. Oh no! With a flash of panic she struggled and thrashed, but this only made matters worse. She glanced up in time to see the underside of the spider's belly just centimetres from her face. So that's an excerpt from chapter 10 of this book. And if you really enjoyed that and would like to read more, well, you can either get it from the shops or on Amazon, or you could get it from your library if you like as well. Any good library or shop will stock this book. It's $6.99 at the moment, and it's for ages 9 plus, although it's probably best suited to 10 plus because there's some themes in the story that are quite scary and might be a little bit too advanced for the younger reader. But it's being sold as 9 plus. So if you've got any questions that you would like to ask me, or if you want to know more about me or the book, you can email me at www.breemccready@googlemail.com, I think, yes. And just to give you another quick taste of what the book's about, I'll read you the blurb, which is the sort of short part of the story on the back of the book. And it's 12-year-old Bree McCready has a mission. She's just one night to save the world. It starts when a clue inscribed in a Half Heart Locket leads Bree and her best friends Sandy and Honey to an ancient magical book. With it they can freeze time, fly and shrink to the size of ants. But they soon discover the book has a long history of destruction and death, and it's being sought by the monstrous Dalofedron, who will stop at nothing to get it. Using its incredible powers, he could turn the world into a wasteland. Bree, Sandy and Honey go on the run, hurtling off city rooftops, down neck-breaking ravines and through night-black underground tunnels to keep the book out of his lethal hands. Little do they know that the greatest danger of all lies ahead in the heart of his deadly lair. Can Bree find the courage to face this terrifying evil and to confront the secrets of her tragic past? Punchy and exciting, this is a thrilling page-turner from a dazzling new talent, which is me, by the way. So, great to speak to you. Hope to hear from some people soon, and happy reading!